Today's guest is Meinl cymbals artist Little John Roberts. Despite the fact that everyone under the sun calls him Little John, I have, for reasons unknown, always simply called him John. I touched on this in the podcast, so you can hear more about that later, but for now, I'm simply going to refer to our guest as John. During the podcast, you'll hear John name-check an insane number of musicians that he has worked with and an incredible number of artists that he has been hired to work for. The list of world-class musicians and artists that John has made music with is just unbelievable. Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, Stevie Wonder, Prince, B.B. King, George Duke, George Benson, Herbie Hancock, Snoop Dogg, Elton John. The list just keeps going. But at the heart of it all are two basic things. A guy that knows his craft and a guy that's incredibly kind. These two attributes are what's helped John stay employed for a very long time in a business that can honestly welcome you today and show you the door tomorrow. John was hipped to Meinl cymbals years ago by fellow Meinl cymbals artist Robert Sput Seawright. After some time of trying our cymbals out and feeling like he was comfortable, John made the switch and joined the Meinl family. I'll talk a little smack and say that along my journey at Meinl, I've dealt with some artists who've done far less than John and talked and acted as if they've done a lot more. Not many guys, just a couple. Despite the level of accomplishments that John's amassed, he simply remains a very humble and a very easy guy to work with, and it's what's made it a true pleasure for him to be a part of our Meinl family. So when I was thinking of who to have on the Meinl Radio podcast next, John was pretty much a no-brainer. I knew it would be a treat to speak with a guy who's done more than most of us could ever dream of, and he acts pretty much as nonchalant about it as possible. So enjoy the podcast. I'd like to welcome everybody into the Meinl Radio podcast. Today we've got my good friend, awesome drummer and Meinl family member, Little John Roberts with us. John, what is up, my friend?
Hey, Chris, how's it going, buddy?
Good, man. It's good to hear from you in these funny times.
You too, man. It's crazy right now.
I know, but let's not let everybody sit there and think about depressing stuff. Let's just jump into cool stuff and dig in a little bit. Let me pick your brain about a lot of things about yourself. And man, I'm going to launch right into the questions if you're cool with that.
Cool, man.
So, born and raised in Philly, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so I always seem to think of Philly as being this sort of dark and dingy looking place like in the first Rocky movie. Was it like that growing up there, or had the city been cleaned up quite a bit by the time you were coming up?
It was half and half. That dark, gloomy kind of vibe was still there, but Philly's such a soulful town, and it was a joy to grow up in a city like that. And the arts, big on the arts, big on culture and everything, jazz music, gospel music. So Philly was just, man, it was the mecca of music too.
So what do you think? If you were going to tell somebody what Philly's biggest cultural export would be. It's pretty easy when you look at a town like New Orleans or Memphis. What would Philly's be?
I would say Philly has a mixture of jazz, R&B, soul, and then, of course, gospel. We had a lot of great gospel artists come out of Philly, which is where I started, playing gospel music in Philly at my dad's church and then playing with groups around town. Edwin Hawkins' seminar would come to Philly, the UNAC Gospel Convention, all those type, huge gospel events will come through Philly, as well as the jazz musicians that are from Philadelphia. Of course, Coltrane, spent a lot of time in Philly before he was in North Carolina. Mickey Roker, amazing jazz drummer. Grover Washington. We had a big history in Philly, so a lot of it is jazz. I would say mixed with, TSOP, the Sound of Philadelphia, Gamble and Huff. A lot of hit records were made from Philly.
Man, that's super cool. Now, you mentioned growing up in the church. I think you've told me that your dad, his occupation was a pastor?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So you grew up in the church, obviously playing music in church. Where did you receive your formal training on the drum set?
First, it started with my uncles. I had 5 uncles that played drums, and so that's how I took a liking to it. I used to go to Settlement Music School a little bit, I was playing with Joey DeFrancesco and Chris McBride. We had a trio together. And actually, that trio, we were winning like the downbeat competitions, Music Fest USA, 3 years consecutively before we before we left high school and went on to college. So Settlement Music School was responsible for a lot of my early technical, teachings, and then leaving Philadelphia and going to Berklee College of Music.
But the trio that you just mentioned, you got started with that trio at a pretty early age, and you guys ended up backing up Wynton Marsalis. Is that correct? Or
Yeah. Wynton, brought us into his Duke Ellington Youth Orchestra, and we were all 15, 16 years old. We were all playing in All City Jazz Band together as well. Actually, recently we just had a reunion in New York at the Blue Note, where we played a residency for a week. Which was amazing. Myself, Joey DeFrancesco, Chris McBride, and Kurt Rosenwinkel, amazing guitar player that actually lives in Germany now, not too far from where Meinl headquarters is.
Wow, that's super cool. Now, was the Duke Ellington Band, was it formed around your trio, or was it already in existence?
It was an idea that Wynton wanted to do with like a hand-picked of some of the best students that he came across in the country. So, some of the guys that are in the Lincoln Jazz Orchestra with him now were in that band, like Walter Blanding Jr., tenor sax player, a few other guys. But that was his baby. When I first met Wynton, I was at high school, at Overbrook High School, and him and rest in peace, his dad, Ellis Marsalis, and the whole Marsalis family came to the school to perform for us with their big band. And that's how I first met Wynton, and we became good friends. And, he basically took me under as a mentor. And then right after that, it was like not too long after that, he decided he wanted to put this Duke Ellington orchestra together and have, his hand-picked young artist musicians to be in the band. So he reached out to myself. He reached out to Joey. Joey actually moved on and was playing with Miles Davis. So Joey had already left. But me and Chris McBride was still back in Philly. And Jafar Barron, who's another amazing, Fareed. Jafar played trumpet, Fareed played piano. So a lot of amazing young jazz musicians came out of Philly. And, 3 of us were chosen to be in Wynton's band.
Was it strange to go from being in Wynton's band at like the age of 16 to then having to go back to school and go to Berklee and be in more of a classroom situation?
Actually, it opened the door for me to get to Berklee, actually. We played at Berklee at the BPC, Berklee Performing Arts Center. And at the end of the show, the president of the school rewarded all of us with scholarships that night.
Wow, dude, that's super cool.
Yeah, so he's like, as soon as you finish high school, you know where you should come.
Now, so you left Berklee after about, a year and a half or 2 years in to hit the road with Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince, right? That was your first road gig?
Okay. Yeah. While I was at Berklee in '91, I stayed there for a good 2 years, and I stayed at Boston for another year after that. So I stayed in Boston for 3 years. But in between that time, I was going back and forth to Philly and recording with Jazzy Jeff and Will Smith, Fresh Prince, and we did an album that's actually still out now. And Jeff told me, he said, "Man, I want to do this live." We were asked to perform on the American Music Awards. And he said, "I want to do this live with you and my other partner, who's an amazing producer that's with The Roots, James Poyser, keyboard player. He wrote a lot of hits, for Lauryn Hill and many others. And he's also part of the Soulquarians with Questlove and other folks, Erykah Badu, Bilal. So yeah, Jeff goes and says, "Man, we want to do a live performance with you and James playing while I'm DJing and he's rapping." So if you look at the old 1994 American Music Awards, that is our performance there. I was actually standing up. I made a stand-up drum kit for that performance.
Wow. Now, I have to ask, was it strange for your mom and dad? Like, did they understand that people that go to Berklee don't necessarily finish Berklee, that sometimes it's just used as a launch pad, more or less. And it's like the understanding is that you may only be there for a couple of years. Getting a scholarship and all of that, were they cool with you leaving early?
They were. I mean, my parents, they've always been like my biggest fans and cheerleaders and everything, and biggest support as far as my decisions with things. Because they noticed that from a young age until that point that I was making some pretty good decisions with how I dealt with the music business and, the moves that I was making, recording at 17 years old for the first time on record and, playing in the All City Jazz Band. So they were watching and seeing my moves and was like pretty impressed by my decisions. So when I got to Berklee and let them know, like, Mom, Dad, I'm thinking I'm getting all these opportunities in different places and this is what I really want to do. They were all for it. Of course, they said the other side of it too, like, hey, you sure, you don't want to get the degree first and then jump into, touring and things like that. I said, yeah, I think I know exactly what it is that I want to do. So they were all for it. And exactly as soon as I left Berklee, I moved to Atlanta. And right when I got to Atlanta, everything just started opening up for me, like touring with Escape and being on Arsenio Hall show, which was huge back then, playing with Monica, being asked to be her music director from Dallas Austin, amazing producer. Jermaine Dupri was the one that asked me to play with Escape, who he produced. So one thing led to another. I went on the road with Dionne Farris before she became like an MTV hit, and right before I left Dionne Farris, she was on MTV with her first video, but I had gotten a call to go with Janet that same year. So 94, I was on the road with Janet at 23 years old.
And when you say Janet, for those of you out there in listener world that do not know, he's talking about Janet Jackson, Michael Jackson's younger sister, who had an incredibly huge pop R&B career.
Yeah, I got to stop saying just Janet. I'm just assuming everybody knows. It's only one real Janet.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. Yeah, I knew first time we talked and you said Janet, I knew exactly who you were talking about. But
right.
I'm going to assume we've got some younger listeners out there who may not know.
Right.
We're not that old, dude. But still. Now, the list of artists in your bio, and by the way, dude, you need to update your bio online.
I know. Actually, I do need to.
It needs a little work, and I'm telling you that as your friend and as your a big supporter.
Right.
I'll even help you write it if you want.
I'm gonna get my assistant Denise on it.
Okay, Denise, come on.
Yeah.
So your list of artists in your bio that you've worked with, I mean, dude, it's really astounding. Like, it's super cool to read. It just kind of floors me when I read it. I'm like, holy crap, man, this guy has just worked with so many awesome names. So I'm going to name just a few of these artists, and for each one, I'd like you to tell me just what thoughts immediately come to your mind when I name them. You don't have to go on forever about a guy. Just tell me kind of what you think. So,
okay.
First, B.B. King.
Oh man, what's the best phrase I could say with him? Macaroni and cheese, greens. And I don't eat chicken anymore, but the best fried chicken you could think of.
So you're just saying, listen, like, working with him was just so comfortable and satisfying?
Absolutely. Yeah. I played with him on the Ray Charles tribute. And it was a huge tribute that we did in L.A. at the Staples Center. And that was my experience with B.B. King, and it was one amazing one. There were a lot of artists on that show, so you might even mention some of them that were on that show as well. But B.B. King, man, Al Green was on that one that night. Stevie Wonder was on it that night. So yeah, but B.B. he was such a sweet guy too to work with.
That's cool. Did you just get up and play like a Ray Charles tune with B.B.?
Absolutely, yeah.
Nice. Okay, next up, Prince.
Oh my God. Mysterious. That's the word that comes to me with him first. Prince, knew about me early before I played with him because I worked on his bass player's record, Rhonda Smith. I played on her album, and he heard it. And the night that I went to go see them perform when they came to Atlanta, I went backstage and I was behind like this curtain. I guess it was you couldn't go past this curtain. You had to stay there and hang. And this hand comes and grabs me from the curtain, and he pulls me over to the other side and he said, "Hey, man, I like how you played on Rhonda's record." And it was really,
that's super cool.
Yeah, it was really short and sweet, but and then he disappeared. And Prince was known for doing things like that. So I was just like, wow, okay, I take that as a compliment. And then like a few years later on, I get a call from Sheila E. to come and play with him for the NAACP Awards, which was in 2005. And man, that was just an experience I'll never forget. We were together for a week rehearsing for it. And that night, it's documented forever. You can see it on YouTube, actually. NAACP 2005 Prince.
Wow. And so working with him for a week in rehearsals, was there some level of perfection that was kind of scary to have to achieve, or was it just laid back the whole time?
It started out scary because, what I heard was that he had his old band across the street rehearsing too, just in case we didn't come through.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this was almost like a live audition, because, he trusts Sheila E., of course. She's mom, so whatever she says goes. And I noticed that in rehearsals, like he would look over to her and see how she felt about things. And if she nodded yes, he'd be like, okay, cool, let's move on. But he still, Prince was always had a plan B and C and maybe D. And when we got to the first day of rehearsal, everybody was kind of on edge, like, man, hopefully we can pull this off. I mean, some of the baddest players was in that room, but we still had that sense of we don't know, we're not sure. But we came in, man, and we truthfully came in and smacked all the arrangements that he had, the ideas. We started working things out. By the second day, it was everybody could breathe a little better, but still on the edge because you don't know. And you don't know what this guy is thinking. He didn't talk to me a whole lot in the beginning. He would actually, John Blackwell, my good friend, was there in rehearsal. And, John was there as well, just in case something didn't go right on my part, so he was hanging out. And he would come over to me and say, yeah, man, he dude said, see if you could play claps on the 2 and 4 on this one, or, hit the accents on this, so he was sending messages to John to me at first. So when he realized that I could pick up everything pretty quick, then that's when it broke the ice for us to have a conversation together. And he would come back and say a few things here and there. Didn't say a whole lot, because he was really happy with how things were going. But that night of the show, man, he was all smiles and, he was ready. And I heard after that show, he had been playing that video over and over and over again just because he really dug how that performance went.
Wow, that's super cool. All right, so I'm not going to go down the ladder just yet. I'm gonna stay. We're gonna take a lateral move, maybe even a little bit vertical in terms of star power. So I also read in your list of artists you've worked with, one of them was Michael Jackson.
Oh yeah.
So what was all that about?
I recorded a song for Michael at his music director's house. Brad Buxter was his music director. I think it was after Greg Philligaines, if I'm not mistaken, who's also a good friend of mine. But the 99, after the Velvet Rope tour, that famous Janet Jackson tour that was on HBO that everybody saw, after that tour was over, which lasted a whole year straight, I came home and I was hanging out in L.A. I was doing a lot of sessions and stuff. People were just hitting me up to come and play on these records and stuff. So I was in L.A. Quite a while. And while I was there, Brad hits me up and says, Lil Jon, Michael Jackson wants to see if you can come play on a song for him. And I was tripping. Michael had seen me play with Janet, and that's how we met. He came to Africa, as a matter of fact, to see us play. And so he had already seen me play and, knew how my style and everything, and he liked it from what I heard. So Brad had me come over to the house. We recorded a song. Michael wasn't there, but Michael was in New York. And they had like a satellite thing going on. This was early pre-technology. So we hadn't gotten to the Skypes and all that stuff yet. But they had some device where there was a video screen on our side and a video screen on his side that we could see each other and talk to each other. So Michael was talking from wherever he was in New York. I think he was in the studio there. And he just watched and listened. And, just basically I said, what do you want me to do? He said, just play what you feel, And I was tripping like, wow, you just want me to play whatever comes to my mind for this song? I guess he just had faith in knowing that I was going to play the right stuff. So I did a few takes because I wanted it to be perfect. But from what I found out is that he had already liked the first take.
Wow.
But he just let me do 4 or 5 takes, just to make sure that I was cool, But yeah, Brad was just like, man, he loves it, And till this day, I don't know where that song is at. I don't know if they used it or whatever, because, Mike has a vault of songs that he probably never put out. But I know that it was supposed to be for a benefit for like Korea or something. It was a song to help raise money for a tragic event that happened in Korea at that time. And I never got to hear that song, and I don't even know how to track Brad down now. I think he's a pilot now. I think that's what he got into, somebody told me. But I'd love to hear it, though.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Okay, so moving on to what was one of your first, or maybe it was your first big gig after the Wynton Marsalis deal, Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. And for people who don't know, Fresh Prince would be Will Smith, the famous actor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, that's Philly already. So Will went to the same high school as me, Overbrook High School. He was a year or two before me. So when I got into Overbrook, I think he was graduating that year. And so I'd see him outside. This was like his prime time because this was like their first record around that time, first or second record. So he was already a star. He was driving around the school, with his red Camaro and everything. Like he was like living the life. And I never really met him then, but I met him when I got with Jazzy Jeff, who pulled me in to come in and start playing like live drum tracks with him. And then that's what helped bring in a lot of the producers that were from the church because of my relationship with Jeff. A lot of the cats that I was cool with were starting to come hang out at the studio and produce like Jill Scott's first record. And, it was called A Touch of Jazz Productions. And we had the jackets and the hats and everything. So we were like a crew, So that's how that relationship started. And then like I said, when I was at Berklee, I was coming back and forth to Philly and still working with them. And then by 94, which was the year that I moved to Atlanta, we went and did that American Music Awards performance.
So what was working with those guys like? Were they, if Will Smith had already attained this pretty high level of fame when he was a senior in high school, what was he like by the time you got to him?
Oh, he was super cool. He had a little edge on him because Will was he was the man, But Will had always been a genuine guy. We'd hang out, we all go to South Street, order, water ices, and come back to the studio where Jazzy lived on Delaware Avenue. He had a studio at his house, and we'd go back in there and watch movies and, hang out and bus on each other, which, I don't know if people know what bussing means, but in Philly is basically joning on each other, joking about each other. So he was always bussing on people. Will was known for joning and clowning you, So you had to watch out because if you had the wrong clothes on or anything, like Will would come at you like, man, what are those sneakers? Where you get them? Like, yeah. So he was always funny and, just as soon as he walked in a room, he would light up the room. And he still has that personality now. He called me later on down the line to play on Men in Black, the soundtrack. I played on Men in Black 2. It's called Nod Your Head. And he just called me out of the blue one time. He had his assistant, Omar Rambert, who went to school with me as well. And he danced for Will and Jeff as well. So he works as an assistant and production manager now for him now. But he reached out to me and said, "Yo, Will wants you to play on this track. Can you do it?" So I said, "Sure." I went in the studio. It was just me, Will, and Jada Pinkett, and we smashed out "Nod Your Head." And once I went to see the movie, I heard it, at the beginning of the movie, and was like tripping. That's me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Okay, I got two more for you. So, and both of these, I mean, one of them you could probably expound upon forever. So, Janet Jackson. What comes to mind when I say Janet?
Man, Janet was the gatekeeper, I would say. Janet is the gig that opened up everything for me as far as like worldwide success and popularity. Once I did that first tour with Janet, everything just changed from there. And, I love her till this day for giving me that opportunity, because I was 23 years old, Chris, and it could have been anybody could have done that gig, like especially veteran drummers that, some had auditioned before for the first tour, or second tour rather, because Derek Organ was with Chucky Booker when they did that tour. So he was already in a band with Chucky Booker, who was her first music director. But for the second tour, the Janet tour, Jonathan Moffett and a bunch of other famous drummers had auditioned for that gig. I just happened to come in. I was basically grandfathered, I'd say, into that gig because, not to say that I didn't deserve it, but I definitely walked past a lot of things that I would have had to do, if I didn't know the right people, if my name wasn't what it was at that time, my reputation. So I didn't audition, none of that stuff. So I basically just got in from word of mouth from the band members that were already in the band. So Sam Sims, Daryl Smith, Rex Salas. I had never met Rex Salas, who was her MD then, but he heard about me and he was good friends with a lot of the people that I was working with. George Duke, George Howard, a lot of those people, they ran in the same circles. I was staying at Omar Hakim's house when they called him to see how he felt about me playing on the gig. I was asleep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was in his guest room that day because I went over to hang out with Omar for like a good 2 days. And we just kicked it. And, I'm like, man, I'm hanging out with one of my mentors. It was a beautiful thing for him to invite me to his house and hang out. And just so happened that night that I stayed, the first night I stayed, I was, resting in the guest room. And they called him, and then I woke up, came downstairs. He said, "Man, I just got off the phone with Rex Salas and a few of the guys at Janet Jackson's camp, and they were asking me about you and trying to see how I felt about if I thought you were capable of doing this gig, And of course I said yes, and I was like, "Yo, thank you, Omar." So I got a lot of good recommendations from the right people to get me into that job. So yeah, that's the gig that opened everything up for me, though.
Okay, last one. I'll ask you for impressions. So, Stevie Wonder.
Oh man, genius. That's the first word that comes to mind when you talk about Stevie. And he is a wonder, and that's his name precedes him. That gig was very, very. Oh man, it was spiritual. It was man, it just took things to a whole nother level for me, because this was 2014, 2015, 2014 when this happened. I had just gotten off the road with Neo, amazing pop R&B artist, and Greg Philligaines reached out to me, who Greg was Michael's MD, Michael Jackson's MD, and, just an amazing producer and keyboard player that played on all stuff that we can think of with Quincy Jones and all, and more. He reached out and said, "Man, Stevie wants to have 2 drummers for this tour for Songs in the Key of Life." Basically because of the sonics of that album, there were a lot of drum parts going on. There were multiple tracks that were done that Stevie played double drums on, or was playing fills in between, some of the takes and overdubs and everything. So he wanted to pull off that effect live with 2 drummers, kind of like James Brown with Clyde and Jabbo. And I'm like, man, I'd love to. Stanley Randolph is his normal drummer, regular drummer. And all respects to him, I was like, man, I don't want to get in the way of his gig or anything. But, they said, no, that's not what we're trying to do here. We want you guys to play sometimes together, and then sometimes we want you to play a certain song and we want him to play a certain song, so we figured it out in rehearsal who would play what song, basically just off the vibe and how Stevie heard it. Okay, Lil Jon, you play this one, Stanley, you play this one, y'all should play these together, so we found a way to make it work and still not step on each other's toes. So that was a really cool gig, man, as far as like musically playing with 2 drummers, 2 percussionists, almost 8-10 horns, 6 to 8 background singers, string ensemble. We hired a string ensemble in every city, so they didn't travel with us, but the rest of the band was traveling together. 2-3 guitar players, Greg Filliganes on synth bass, Nathan Watts on electric bass, so it was like, 2 or 3 keyboard players. It was like 30 something of us on stage every night. And it was amazing.
Yeah, no, I saw the show. The funny part about that show was I think it was at the arena here in Nashville, and I think at about 12 o'clock at midnight or 12:30 in the morning. I mean, normally shows end at 11. And at about 12 o'clock, midnight or 12:30, Stevie's still going. And at that point, he's playing another ballad. And I'm like, holy crap, man. You don't close with ballads. You close with something a little more slamming. So, like, he's still got a ways to go. I mean, I literally had to drag my rear out of there and get home and get some sleep. And I couldn't believe it. I had so much crazy respect for the guy. I was like, man, the old man, he's really got it in him.
Every night, Chris, 4 hours, if not more, 4 hours, but you wouldn't get tired. I know we didn't get tired, and it seemed like the crowd didn't get tired either because they stayed most of the time. But
no, I was just a lightweight. I'm not a barometer for like the crowd. I was the exception of the rule. I was the lightweight that couldn't hang.
Oh yeah, and you had to be at work in the morning.
yeah, that's my excuse.
Yeah. But man,
okay,
so that was crazy. I mean, because once we did finish the record songs, he would go into playing some of his other hits. So then that would be a whole nother, encore, another hour encore probably.
Oh, dude, his encores, yeah. It was like 2 hours worth of encores. I mean, it was nuts.
Yeah.
So, which gig that you've been on has taught you the most valuable lesson you ever had to learn in your career?
George Duke was responsible for a lot of the things that I learned that helped me approach the other gigs in a certain way. Of course, I learned certain things on Janet's gig that I wouldn't have learned anywhere else. I mean, that was a high-tech gig, production-wise, everything. Like, everything was really top secret, top security. You really had to watch things that you did because you were representing her as well as yourself. So I had to approach that gig a whole nother way because I was young, too. So it was certain things just as a young boy I had to learn that I couldn't do, going overseas and, just can't be careless and, watching things, But George, being with him opened up a whole nother level of education as far as how to approach the music, playing with other people, playing different styles of music, because he played everything. So if I couldn't play a samba or a Brazilian beat the right way, I learned how to do it the right way playing with him, because he was just that much diverse with his music.
So which gig taught you the hardest lesson you've ever had to learn in your career? The one lesson you think back on and still to this day you kind of cringe and you're like, oh, I hate thinking about that moment.
Oh man, Janet, like first tour, spending all my money and coming home with half of what I should have had. That taught me real quick to save my money.
Yeah. That's a rough lesson. Was there a long time in between when that gig ended and you came home with only half of what you should have had, and the next time you got to go out on another gig and make some money?
Well, luckily, once I did that gig, that just, like I said, it opened up a lot of doors for me playing with other people and recording and stuff, being in LA and hanging out a lot. Everybody knew who you were once you got Janet's gig, So it fortunately it helped stuff that I did in between the first tour and the second tour that I had done with her. Because, the Janet tour was in 94 and the Velvet Rope tour was in 98. So the 4 years in between that time, that's when I started playing with George Duke and playing with George Howard, and Jonathan Butler took me to Africa for the first time. That's where he's from, Cape Town. And, just the experiences that I did in between that first tour and that second tour. I did so much in the course of 4 years at that time.
Man. Super cool. All right.
Yeah.
I got another question for you about gigs.
Okay.
Tell me about your time. You've mentioned this to me a little bit before, but I want you to share with everybody out there. So, fellow Meinl cymbal artist Sput, who we talked about earlier, he was, and I'm going to say this because, dude, some people literally don't know it. So he was the second drummer with Snarky Puppy. He was the first drummer with them, he was the second drummer, but like when they broke big, he was like the first guy that everybody really knew about. Mm-hmm. And there's actually going to be some people that listen to this that don't even know he's a drummer. They think he's a keyboard player because they've seen the videos online of him doing like the VF jams and whatnot. And so they think, oh, he plays drums too. I mean, I've literally answered those comments on our YouTube channel. It's just, it's funny to me. It makes me happy for Sput that he's got some extra skills, to help diversify. But so Sput played with Snarky Puppy, and at one point you subbed for him on that gig, right? Uh-huh. What was that like?
Oh man, that was crazy. For one thing, musically it was a challenge because I never got a chance to rehearse with them. I mean, even the first time I played with them, I think Spud had missed his flight or something, and it was in Atlanta. So he hit them and told them, call John. That's the only person that I know that could probably pull this off without no rehearsals. So Michael Lee...
So hang on. I'm sorry to interrupt. The reason you got the gig was because Spud missed his flight?
Something like that happened. Yeah, Spud didn't make it to Atlanta.
Yeah, that's funny.
Right.
Keep going.
I don't want to put him out there like that, but he missed the gig.
No, I'm sure it was for a legitimate reason.
Yeah. And he told Mike League and those guys to call me, and he said, man, if anybody could pull it off, John could do it. And I learned the whole show in my car an hour before they were supposed to go on. Packed house, the whole nine. I was nervous as hell because I heard the music. It was the what album is that? Ground Up, I believe it was the Ground Up record. And I heard the record, but I didn't study it yet. I was just like, wow, this is some amazing stuff. And Spud, man, you sound great on here. And but I didn't get a chance to learn it enough to go and perform it myself. So I was like, what? So Michael League's in my car. We're outside of the venue, and we're listening to the songs that they were going to play that night. And he's counting it up, counting the measures and bars out to me, like the meter, odd meter stuff and all. And I'm like, oh, my God, how am I going to pull this off? And I always, second guess myself in situations that I probably shouldn't because, I pulled it off. And everybody was just like, yo, how did you learn those songs in an hour?
Yeah.
But, he gave me certain figures that's how the cheat thing that happened for me was him giving me some of the figures and counting them out to me and telling me how the figures went. Because, it wasn't on... I didn't have a chart to read or anything. I had to go strictly off of memory and what he had just told me an hour before we went on. So, and of course he helped, as much as he could. Nate Worth was there as well. So he was helping me, with some of the patterns and stuff like that. So, man, we got through the gig and we didn't suck, So
you didn't have one train wreck on stage?
I didn't have a train wreck. No.
Wow,
and
that's awesome.
Then they called me again and said, we have a run that Sput can't make, and it's about a month long. And matter of fact, I was coming off the road from something I had done with Janet or somebody, I can't remember. I had just gotten off the road though and went straight to the airport and met them at whatever city that they started in. And it was funny because I went straight from Prevost, up-to-date tour bus to a 12-passenger van.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they have a video of me coming out of the airport and I'm walking towards the minivan. And they're like, here's, Lil Jon Roberts coming off tour with Janet Jackson and going on tour with Snarky Puppy. So it was hilarious, man. Yeah, man. But I didn't care about that. Mike told me, he's like, man, I know you're used to certain things, accommodations and hotels and all that kind of stuff. But that's not how we roll here, so hopefully you can handle it. And I said, man, don't worry about it. I was just excited to play with those guys and play that music because the music was just out of this world. And I had such a great time performing every night with them.
Dude, so anybody out there who's listening, if you go to Little John's website, you can find, like when I clicked on videos on your website, I was for sure I was going to find the Meinl videos we had done with you on there. Like maybe you had embedded them.
Oh, man, I haven't touched that website. Just like my bio, like you said, I need to update my website too.
Oh, dude, I'm just busting on you right now. No, it's funny. But the point is that on your website, the only video out of your entire career, I mean, there's those NAACP awards. There's all those videos. Like the one video that you were on that Prince watched forever, it's not there. The one video that's there is you jamming with Snarky Puppy. And which is killer. Like, I love it that it's there because the one video of a show that you had to learn this incredibly complex music for an hour beforehand, and that's the video that's up there. It's kind of like, now that you've told me the story, like more in depth, I almost feel like you have the biggest testimonial to how much of a badass you are that's up on your website. You're kind of like, you know what? I don't need this video of me with Prince, and I don't need this video of me with Janet, or what I'm going to put up here is this video of me with Snarky where I learned the show 1 hour ahead of time. You know what I mean? Like that's a heck of a trophy you've got up there. I think that's awesome that it's there.
Man, thank you. And check this out though. That song that video is of, I didn't learn that song. I played that. They called that song on the spot. Oh. And was showing me the accents and everything while we were playing. I'll never forget that night. I think it was in Boone, North Carolina. I will never forget it. Like they were showing me the hits while we were playing the song. I heard the song before, but I had never played it before. So
oh my gosh. So maybe you had a couple of deer in the headlights moments?
Absolutely. I was like, what's happening next? But Michael League is such a great music director. Like, you can't go too wrong with him being right there and kind of showing you where things fall and stuff like that. So he helped out a lot. But then I had to take a solo on top of those hits, and I was like, what?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, man.
Well,
crazy.
You did a good job, man. The video it's pretty awesome. Anybody that's interested, before John's website gets retooled, you should watch that video.
Right. I need to update that thing. I didn't even do that that website. We put that up because my record was coming out. That was 2013 and somewhere around there, 14, and we had to have something for things, to send people to. So we did that site just for my record.
That's funny. Okay, so a few more questions for you here. Now, you've played a lot of jazz gigs in your career in addition to all the R&B gigs that you're known for. If you had to kind of sort of divide it up in your brain, how much of your career has been spent playing jazz versus playing R&B? And what do you personally get out of playing each type of gig?
Man, that's a great question, Chris. Well, it all started out early for me, of course, when we talked about with Wynton Marsalis and Joey DeFrancesco and Chris McBride. So that was 15, 16 years old. Then going to Berklee, and that took it to a whole nother level, playing around a lot of jazz cats like Ernie Watts and hanging out with Roy Haynes and hanging out with Pat Metheny and, doing gigs with Bruce Bartlett is his name. He was an amazing guitar player in Boston. John Blackwell actually did that gig after me as well. Abe Laboriel played on that gig. I came in after Abe because we were at school at the same time as well. Torsten DeWinkel, he was an amazing guitar player I don't know where he is now, but he is an amazing guitar player from Germany. And as a matter of fact, that is the first time that I played Meinl cymbals. I met Stefan.
Oh, really? It was like backline stuff?
No, Stefan. I met Stefan.
Oh, that's
in
right.
90...
That's right. You actually played Meinl for a second before you left Meinl, and then went on to, I guess, Sabian. Right.
Yep. But Stefan, who was so amazing, and thank you, Stefan, for looking out for me when I was 19, 20 years old. He sent me a package of cymbals to use, and I actually went to the Music Messe in Germany, in Frankfurt, and played those cymbals there with Torsten de Winkel, Matt Garrison, who is, oh God, I'm messing up names here. Matt Garrison, who's the bass player that played with Coltrane's bass player. That's his dad. He was in the trio with us. So we came to Germany and played. Ernie Watts was playing sax with us. And I came there with my new Meinl cymbals, man. Like I think they were called Raker or Riker series.
Yeah, Raker. Those were, that was a series of like, they were kind of brownish looking, and they were extensively hammered and had heat treated bells on them. And
yeah,
dude, there's this whole contingency of, I mean, I say whole, it's quite a small group of people, but that still live and die by those cymbals if they have them.
Man, that's crazy. So, I mean, as my sound got better, I started digging into different cymbal sounds and stuff. I didn't know as much as I knew later on about cymbal sounds. So, I mean, I was just happy to get some free cymbals,
Yeah.
I had this one ride, though. Oh, my God. If I wish I still had it now. And tell you what, that ride was, it was uneven. Like one side was heavier than the other. But so like when I put it on the cymbal stand, it would just turn onto the heavy side, like because it was unweighted, it was unevenly weighted on the whole cymbal. So, but I would play on the heavy side, which sounded so good, for the style of music I was playing at that time. So yeah, just long story short, hopefully, the jazz side kind of is even with the R&B and stuff, like, because I'm still playing jazz now. I'm coming back to where I started from now. Like I don't want to make it sound bad, but I'm kind of not feeling like playing the pop type stuff now. Like I'm really attracted more to the jazz sound again, and that's why I've been doing these gigs lately with Joey DeFrancesco, and we had a whole list of gigs that we were going to do this summer as the Philly reunion band. Probably without Christian McBride because he was already booked. But we were going to keep the ball rolling with the three of us, and maybe Kevin Eubanks was going to play guitar. My other buddy Orrin Evans from Philadelphia was playing keys as well. So we were going to have like an all-star Philly band doing some jazz gigs. Of course, not just straight ahead, but we play some funky stuff as well. But still with a jazz, heavy jazz influence. So I'm gearing back to playing more jazz now, and I love it.
So now that we're talking about evolution, at what age would you say to yourself, like, no way when it comes to extensive touring, even if the touring is comfortable and nice?
Like what age now?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you're at that point now. But I'd say probably not. I mean, you're not old by any stretch of the imagination. You're still a young buck, all things considered.
I still got room left.
No, you still got room. But like, have you ever thought like, what age would I be where I think I might be toast from going on the road?
Maybe 60-something, 70. I play with George Benson, and he's 74, I think now, something like that. And he's still rolling, man. So if he's still going, I should probably be able to still keep going as well by then.
Yeah,
but cool. Drums are a different beast too, man. Like I said, physically, if my body can keep up with it by then, I'll keep rolling until the wheels fall off, literally.
Yeah. Well, okay. A couple more questions for you. Back around 2004, 2005, you did an interview in Modern Drummer with Billy Amendola. Mm-hmm. And Billy asked you, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And your answer at the time had been more on the production side of things. So let's just say that was 2004. So that would have been 16 years ago. And so 6 years ago then, you would have been more on the production side of things had your vision come true. So did that come to fruition? Is that what happened, or how do you, like, where are you now?
It did. Actually, doing my record was part of that process. And then, a lot of people hit me up, either for drum programming type stuff or to help kind of produce projects. Like I'm always good for putting bands together. So, or just handpicking the right people for a situation. So I've always got those kind of calls. I even got it more and more after I put my record out because they noticed that, oh, John has a producer side to him that, that we weren't really aware of. But I had kind of been doing that for a while, like even playing with George Duke and playing with famous singer Rochelle Farrell, helping, in the studio with production for her stuff. And, just anybody that I've worked with, I've always had input in the process of the recording sessions outside of just playing drums. I would go into the booth and or the recording side, the recording booth, and give a lot of ideas for things to make things sound better outside of just drums. So that was definitely a turning point when I put the record out, The Heartbeat. If you ever guys want to listen to it on iTunes or Spotify or whatever. After that record was put out, that's when people were kind of hitting me up and like, yo, can you play on this? And can you help with the production of this? And, so it did actually come to fruition from what I said in the interview.
Dude, that's super cool. All right, now last question that ties in with that. So where do you see yourself in 10 more years from now?
10 more years from now. Man, I hope I can get a teaching job at a university. I almost had one. Berklee had reached out to me a few years ago, and luckily it didn't go through because that was the year that Janet people had called me and said that they were getting ready to go out on tour again. So that was 2016 that Berklee was reaching out about possibly doing a job there. But I would like to have a position at a university, some type of either ensemble type teacher, because like I said, I'm good with putting groups together and helping refine their sound and, just putting the icing on the cake with people that are already talented, but they just need to get to that next level. So that's where I see myself helping in that area with, of course, I do teaching now, private lessons, or we do video stuff now that, we have social distancing going on. But I think that's a big strong point in for me is mentoring and teaching, especially like the younger ones that's coming up now, older ones too. But I like teaching the younger ones a little more because they're still open and they don't have like bad habits and things like that they get stuck in and can't get out of. A lot of us older heads, we stuck in our ways. So it's hard to teach us new tricks.
Yeah, no, I get it. And it's not just a physical thing either. I mean, you can get some real stubborn dudes who just don't want to hear it,
Right.
So the younger guys are a little bit more open to the mental suggestions.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned that was my last question for you, but I want to make sure that everybody knows this. So right now, while there is this whole thing going on with social distancing, you are available for online education. Where can people find you online in order to contact you?
Of course, Instagram is cool. Everything is at Little John Roberts. My Twitter is easy to reach me. My email is myname@gmail.com. littlejohnroberts@gmail.com. Facebook, I have a fan page, which is Little John Roberts. My personal page, which is full, but you could still reach me, through Messenger or whatever, is John Roberts. So I think that, you should be able to find me that way.
Have you ever noticed that I've only ever called you John? I've never called you Little John?
And I love it.
Okay. All right, cool. It just kind of occurred to me. I was like, I call him John. It's kind of like I've got a buddy named Billy, and everybody calls him Billy, and I always call him Bill. It's kind of like I saw...
My closest friends call me John, really.
Okay, all right. Cool.
So that's cool. It fits right on in. In my family, that's where my name started from because my dad's name is John Sr., so I'm a junior. And what I did at some point in my career, I started telling people, my name's Little John, and I just started making it like into a brand for myself, But the people that really, really know me and are close to me They just call me John.
Okay. All right, I'll roll with that. Cool. Man, John, thank you so much for being part of the podcast, dude. I really appreciate your time and just sharing with us everything that you had to say. It's been super great to listen to.
Man, my pleasure, bro. Thanks for reaching out.
Thanks for listening to Meinl Radio. If you liked this episode, please head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. We would appreciate it very much. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.